What I found at the core of most of our psychological ills is culture, is the content, is the structure, right? It's like when you go to the NFL, they don't care about your soul, right? They care if you can perform on Sundays. Because if you think of the amount of life, the amount of vitality that football players sacrifice for the glory of the game, for the fame, for the paycheck, for the accomplishment, it's a huge sacrifice. You know, the life expectancy for a professional football player is 57 years old. And so the question I have for any football player is, when you fast forward to the end of your life, okay, does it feel like it was worth it?
What's up, man?
What's up? The main priority in my mental health journey, I just got to the point where I just wanted to feel good.
Damn, can I just feel?
I I have the money and I have all this other stuff that's supposed to make me feel good, but I don't feel good. And so it was like a real life issue that I was wrestling with. And it was difficult because when I tried to talk to someone about not feeling good, they would look at me and say, it's your fault if you don't feel good. Look.
You got everything, man, which is the same thing we continue to do to athletes, right?
Yeah, and the reality for me, and I see it's a reality for a lot of people, is the main reason I was unhappy is because what I sacrificed to have it all. Is the main thing I sacrificed was my own mental health, right? And that's the message we get, right? I remember the first time I was like really sick in the NFL. Like I had a flu, I couldn't get up, I couldn't see straight. And I remember getting up in the morning and calling the head trainer and saying, I'm not coming to work today, I feel like crap, you know? He said, you got 30 minutes to get to He said, you got 30 minutes to get here, you know? And that activated, you know, my warrior and say, okay, I can.
You're right, I gotta push through it.
I can tough through this. So it made me successful as a football player, but it made me miserable as a human. And I remember the day I was in my locker room and I was having one of those reflective days and I was sitting in my locker and I was thinking, you know, I did this to give back, to have some kind of to inspire people. But I feel like mainly what I'm doing is distracting people for a couple hours on Sundays, sometimes Mondays, you know? And I had this longing that I haven't done anything. You know, yeah, they look at me and they're happy, but as far as my heart and what I'm here to accomplish, I got work to do. And if I keep chasing the football dream, I'm gonna waste all my good years doing this, and I'm not gonna have anything to offer. And that scared me to death.
When you look back though at your experience and your journey, you got diagnosed with social anxiety disorder, here's the label, right? When do you remember that first starting in your life?
You know, I've always been more reserved, shy, sensitive person, and I think one of the reasons I leaned into football was because it added balance. And so I think it was really when I made the shift from being a college football player to being a professional football player. And what I connect that to is it was the first time that I feel like my soul's journey or my inner journey and my outer journey diverged.
Interesting.
You know?
You were out of alignment.
I was out of alignment. And the way I identified it is when I was a kid, you know, my mom told me, you know, you're going to college and I can't pay for it. Right? So when she said that, the faith that she gave me was that I'm getting a scholarship. So it was a foregone conclusion that I was getting a scholarship. Right? And then as I connected to that story, I remember watching Notre Dame football. And I was like, I'm playing college football. I want that experience. And so, foregone conclusion. Okay? And then I got to college and I was like, I'm gonna be the best ever, right? There was a meaningful narrative that I connected to. And I accomplished that. But in my mind, my story, my narrative, it didn't go beyond that, it stopped.
And what drove even the desire to be the best?
I think it's more accidental. You know, I remember most of my success in football was a surprise to me. You know, and it's when we do certain things, we recognize, oh, either I love this or I have a special kind of gift or talent in this direction. But then once we recognize that, we owe it to ourselves to put the work in to develop ourselves in that direction. Another way of saying that is I think we all have the potential to be the best at something. I think of on a football team, right? It's a beautiful example, is because you need variety to come together and all at their best contribute to some joint purpose. And I think the same thing in life, is we start to value what we have the greatest potential to be the best at, to thrive, and we move in that direction, I think we're going to be fulfilled, we're going to be happy, and we're going to be contributing something.
Did you see the trade coming from New Orleans to Miami? Did you know that was on the table? Did you know it was going to happen?
When I got to New Orleans, my rookie year was it was horrible. I was hurt. I missed a bunch of games. It was bad. The next year, Coach Dickey gets fired. We get a new coach, and the new coach comes in, and he's heard all these horrible things about me. So we start on this rocky. So it's not a pleasant experience. And then we get on the same page, and I'm killing it. Like, the team won 6 games in a row. I get to 1,000 yards in week 10. But on my 1,000th yard, right, the universe speaks to us. On my 1,000th yard, my ankle breaks. So I'm sitting in the locker room, and the doctor comes in, and he breaks the news, and I start sobbing, right? Just like, it was like the death of this image was like gone, because I realized the glory, it can just end like this, right? And something didn't sit right with me. So I started thinking about politics. My mind started to already shift to having a larger presence and using the platform to do something. And then I got traded. Okay? And then I get traded to a contender who needs a running back, and it's sexy Miami, and end up leading the league in rushing. And so it like re-sparks the vision and the dream, right? And then kind of the same thing happened. That next year, injuries, and I realized like,
this was the universe speaking to you.
This is the universe speaking to me. The universe was starting to show me, actually, no, we have other plans for you. You know, like part of and I've read a lot of mythology because it speaks to a part of me that my formal education doesn't. And we see it in a lot of movies. Like one of my sons loves the Lord of the Rings movies, you know? And I think he really connects to the idea that an earnest group comes together and goes on a journey. And I think as you follow that journey, sometimes you come to the raging river, right? And you have to figure out, like, what do we do? You know, and sometimes, you know, we chicken out and we turn back. Right? But sometimes we figure a way to traverse the river, right? And we become braver and more fit for our journey. And sometimes, right, and I think we get this image from video games, sometimes you try to traverse the river and you get washed down, you know? But like in video games, and I think most of the times in life, right, you get another chance, right? You get another chance and you keep going at it until you figure it out.
Was that something that was instilled in you at a young age? Is that just kind of, you know, the nature of who you are as a person at your core, that this response to, I'm not getting what I need, and if I'm not getting what I need, then I'm going to either advocate for it or create my own lane?
I guess it's both. I guess it's part of like my nature, and then it's been nurtured by the different experiences that I've had. And I'd say the most powerful nurturing experience was just growing up in a very religious household. And I think as a kid, I remember going to Sunday school and just hearing the stories, you know, and something about the stories of Jesus and the stories in the Bible, they just really spoke to my young mind. I remember I was talking to my analyst yesterday, actually, and somehow the story of Jonah in the belly of the whale came up. And I remember as a kid, you know, hearing this story in Sunday school, and actually imagining myself being inside the stomach of a whale. And I think those visualizations as a kid prepared me when I got suspended to realize I was in the belly of the whale. Like I'm here now. And so when I was feeling what I was feeling, there was almost a sense of expectation and almost pride that I'm actually really living.
And therefore knowing that the film is not over, the story's not over. You're in the middle of the...
That was the insight that saved me, right? Because everything was falling apart, and I connected to that, and I was like, wait a minute, you know? This isn't the end of the story. This is the part when the hero's in trouble, but they figure it out. And that just motivated me to keep on going.
What are some of the symptoms that you were experiencing at the height of your anxiety?
Well, the main one that comes to mind is I remember every day walking into work and wanting to put a towel over my head, not wanting to do what I love. The message I was getting from the outside was, this is what life is all about, right? Everyone that interacted with me, it was coming from that perspective of this image of who I was supposed to be. But the reality of who I was growing to be was very different than that image. And so I felt alienated from my life. And again, it was difficult because it was what everyone dreams of. But it wasn't my dream. My dream ended when I won the Heisman Trophy. And I think the mistake if I can use that, is I didn't come up with a different dream.
But in hindsight, would you have made a different step given knowing what you know now?
Ended up doing it because, again, like we come to the river, sometimes we're not ready, we turn back, but that river doesn't disappear, right? To continue on our journey, eventually we have to cross that river. And so it's easy now in hindsight to say, and I felt it at the time, but not strong enough, that I would have taken at least a year off and I would have traveled around the world. Because I think even if I think back, the core of why I really wanted to be someone is to be able to travel around the world. Because as a kid, I was in the advanced classes, and so I was around kids that had just access to more resources and I was the only kid in the class that had never left San Diego, right? These kids had been to national parks and some of them had been to other countries. So I had this longing to I want to see the world. I want to experience this. Eventually, when I finally retired, that's when I finally woke up to that. I need to see the world, right? There's things out there that I need to experience that are going to inform my path and my mission in life. And if I stay in this, it looks wonderful, but if I stay in this gilded cage, I'm not going to have the necessary food or experiences I need to grow into who I need to be.
Tell me, help me remember this. What was the story the world told about Ricky Williams retiring, and what was the actual truth of what was going on?
What played out was an internal process, and we can't always, we can't always measure the internal process. It's an unfolding. It's like drama or myth or story, right? You don't really understand it to the end of the movie, and you're like, oh,
dang, that's what it was.
That's what was going on.
Yep.
And there were so many synchronicities, so many signs, to finally it got to the point where I was like, okay, I get it. It's like the saying, right? If you listen to the whispers, there's no need to deal with the shouts. And the whispers were there. The whispers were there and they got louder and I still ignored them because the shouts of what I was supposed to do were drowning them out. And so I made the decision to listen to my heart, and what did I do? Started traveling around the world and having the experiences that I was neglecting. And my life, and I tell people, I say, the 3 months after I retired, I felt like I lived more in those 3 months than I had the previous 27 years of my life.
How do you maintain, or were you able to maintain a sense of knowing the truth about yourself despite all of that? How did you do that?
So the truth about ourselves, I think that truth is the whisper. Is the whisper. And it's notice when the room is really quiet, you hear sounds that you didn't even recognize were there before. But when it's loud, you don't even, and I think it's that. It's the training process of learning to recognize the whispers. And as you recognize them and tune into them, they get louder. And I think the point is that the whisper is at least as loud as the voices that are coming from the outside. Because the truth is we live in two different worlds, right? We live in an outer world where we have to make choices and pay bills and interact, and we live in an inner world. We have to feel good about those choices. And I think most of us are trained to give more space to the outer voices and less to the inner. I think we have to reverse that.
We now live in a world where, just like mental health is less stigmatized, especially here in California and a lot of other states, not only has stigma decreased around using weed, but on top of that, accessibility, laws have changed. What's that been like for you to see that, given that that was something that it totally impacted your life?
I think it's very much related to this conversation. So I think especially COVID, where in a lot of states where cannabis is recreationally legal, it was considered like a necessary thing. So a lot of dispensaries got to stay open, and people started to make the connection between cannabis and mental health.
A landmark moment in
Yes.
the cultural narrative shifting.
Yes, removing a lot of those stigmas and taboos for people. In the same conversation, we're also starting to see other psychedelics become more culturally acceptable. And the term psychedelic, we get back to the psyche word.
Which is?
Soul.
There it is.
And delic, revealing, soul revealing. And so my experience, my lived experience of cannabis is when I consume, okay, the whispers become a little bit easier to hear. Wow. Right? And I think that's also part of the negative paranoia, is because sometimes what those whispers are saying, right, scares the crap out of us because we've spent so much time not listening to them. Okay? And if we can move through that process, and that's what I did, moving through that process, right, it was easier to hear the whispers. I didn't know what meditation was. It just was something exotic. But when I actually started to do the practice, I noticed this is exactly how I feel when I consume cannabis. You know, is this like, and it actually changed the way I consumed cannabis. Is that, you know, and then when I've experimented with psychedelics, it all takes me to that same space where I'm having a real interaction with the whispers.
What brought you back to the league?
The conclusion I came to is that my purpose doesn't exclude football, it includes football, but I have to stop excluding myself. And so I came back, and one way to think about it is to clear my name, because even if I wanted to make a difference in the world, I would have to overcome the reputation that I created by the way I left. And so I thought, I need purpose, and my purpose is gonna come through the platform that being a football player has allowed me. And so I saw that part of my journey was, you know, going back to that raging river. But now I had the tools to be able to cross it successfully and keep on with my journey.
The NFL. Part of what their protocols were that you went to Boston. Maybe you could share more about that story.
2004, I retired, came back 2005. At the end of 2005, I failed another drug test and I was suspended for a year. So that year was up, and it was 2 weeks before I was going to be reinstated back into the NFL. And part of the NFL's reinstatement process is they send you for a psychological evaluation. So they said, okay, we're going to fly you to New York and Boston for 2 days, and then just so the doctors check out that you're okay, and then, you know, that's part of the process. So I end up failing another drug test before I'm reinstated, okay? And I call the NFL after I get the letter about the drug test, and they say, well, we're going to cancel your psychological eval because obviously you're not going to be reinstated. And I said no. I said, I don't understand what's going on. I think I could really use a psychological evaluation. So I said, please, can we keep it on? And what the doctor said is, you know, said, we've reviewed your records, and it seems like the issue here is that, you know, they just looked at you as some California surfer kid that liked to smoke weed. They didn't realize that you were a sensitive person that's on a spiritual journey trying to figure yourself out. Wow. And when she said that, I was like, I had identified with how the NFL had identified. I was starting to like buy into that story. And when someone else saw me, I was like, right, that part came back, and I was like, yes. That
was a huge pivotal moment in your entire part of that journey, right?
Because it was the first time that I felt seen from someone who was a representative of the NFL. And so I left New York and I went to Boston, and I had a very similar experience with Dr. Gunderson at McLean Hospital. And one of the words that he said, and I can still remember like it was yesterday, he said, I think you could really benefit from intensive psychotherapy. And when he said that, like the thought in my mind was like, that sounds like fun.
And again, your response to that, I'm like, it sounds like fun. Most people, when they hear that, they're like, oh no, I'm gonna get analyzed, but given where you were at in your journey, that was the universe opening up and saying, here's another thing for you.
I think this is one of the biggest obstacles to taking and prioritizing our mental health, is that it's mysterious. It's, you know, especially as men, we're taught like, you know, boys do what they want, men do what they have to do, right? Is that, and so it's like, and you know, your willpower, right? And so when you realize that we're making choices that we don't understand, you realize there's something else going on in there, and if I don't have some kind of relationship with this, I'm gonna be anxious all the time. And so I was just motivated because I realized there's parts of me that I don't have a relationship with, and I don't like that. And so I knew that intensive psychotherapy meant having a better relationship with those parts of myself. And so I was like, yes, that's what I need. And so I was so lucky. I feel lucky, NFL supported this, that I had 6 months of intense focus on really getting to understand myself on a deeper level. It's the training, right? When we're a kid and we're expressing our true desires, and it's inconvenient to our parents or to our teachers, right? The training is to do something with that. Do something with that, okay? And so our training is to clamp down the soul, because, right, if in the NFL, if all the players were truly listening to their purpose, a lot of them would leave. A lot of them would leave, and then the fear is they would leave and then we'd be stuck. But the truth is they would leave, and the people it's truly their destiny to be on the football field will be able to show up.
I'm sorry, but that's mind-blowing to think about what you just said.
Well, I say if I ever was the head coach of a college team, right? I walk in and here's my opening speech, okay? I'd say, you know, just based on the numbers, okay? There is a small percentage of you guys in here, maybe large, that really don't want to be here. Okay? And any of you guys that have the courage to stand up and say, I'm one of those guys, I will honor your scholarship.
Wow.
Right? That's acknowledging. That's, even if it's not, if it's direct, that's speaking to everyone in there, to their soul, saying that for some of you guys, you're here for the right reasons because it's part of your path. And for some, I understand, because of the pressure, you're not. There's no shame in that. Waking up to that and listening to your heart and being rewarded for it, that's what I want to put out into the world. Because right now we're punished often for listening to our hearts because it's inconvenient to the people who need to have power over us.
To this mental health epidemic that we have, what are some of the non-obvious solutions that we're not doing? Is it about helping people get organized better in community and tell their stories in a vulnerable sort of way? Like, is it us getting back to the campfires that we no longer have and sitting around in a circle? Is that what's missing so much?
Well, I think that's part of the process, but I think, like, in the scientific age, we've become really good at finding problems. But I think because of our limited mechanistic scientific worldview, we're not so good at solutions that don't fit our logic. So, like, I made a promise to myself the other day, just that, you know, because I have a platform and as I speak, to start using the word soul more. You know, Carl Jung talks about the need for us to live a symbolic life. This feeling that our life is more than just going to work and paying bills and taking care of our kids, that there's something greater to our existence.
Greater meaning,
yes.
Purpose.
That we need that. And I think that's the missing piece. And I think it's as simple as just having the conversation with people. What do you think is your purpose on the earth? Just starting the mind, to giving the mind permission to go there.
It's so funny that you use the example of, if I were a college coach. Is there ever a time in your life where you truly jump into coaching?
If a Division I college called me up, maybe even Division II college called me up and said, we want to give you the head coaching job, I'd take it in a heartbeat. Like, my training in football prepared me to take on anything. Like, the confidence I built from those experiences. You know, we talk about, like, our mental health, our physical health, they're very much the same. In the same way, if you can train yourself to be physically tough, it's the same mechanism to training yourself to be mentally tough. And also, especially football, working together as a team, having each other's back, supporting each other. You bring your philosophy, you bring your system, and you implement it. And if you can get everyone to buy in, you see, right? That you see the end result. And one of the things that I think Carl Jung talked a lot about, I'm not sure if he used this term, but that there is a group soul. You know, and even like between two people, there's a group energy. But when you get a team together, you can feel it, right? If you're watching a game and, you know, the home team scores first, you can feel the group soul of the away team. You can feel it like, oh, right? Most of the time. But a team that has a strong group soul, you can feel it.
You can feel that.
You can feel it.
The success you had in Miami, and then you eventually, your last stop was in Baltimore. What did that feel like? There was a completion of like a chapter? Did you feel like you went there, you got what you needed to basically complete that, and you were finally ready to leave it be?
Yeah, the completion was you know, when I got to the 10,000 yard mark, I was like, check, you know, check. Because to me, like, that's the story, right? You know, I retired for a year, I was suspended for a year and a half, ups and downs, different teams. I was no longer a starter for half of my career, and still was able to manage to get to 10,000 yards rushing.
Wow.
Because it shows people, like, people are so afraid to be themselves because they're afraid that they're not going to have outer success. And I think what they sacrifice is too much. But if you can lean into the idea that I can be fulfilled and be successful, right? I don't think people believe it's possible.
I give you this job, okay, Ricky? I want you to come in and I want you to head up the soul care of the NFL.
Yeah.
What would you do to really provide the true support that players need?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is there would be, and the role traditionally is the chaplain, but I would take this more seriously and not only put it in a traditional religious context, is that it would be like the person that's in charge of taking care of the soul of the players on the team. And I would guarantee that team is gonna perform better. They're gonna feel more aligned with being where they are and what they're doing. That's a whole nother level when we think of mental health in athletes that no one is talking about.
Say more.
So just an example here, okay? Football player has a football game, okay, and they get a concussion, right? One of the things we know, right, especially immediately after a concussion, is brain function is affected. And one of the things that our brain is responsible, executive functioning, the choices we make.
Yep.
Okay? Someone has a concussion because of the game they play, and because of the concussion, their brain's not functioning right, and they make poor choices, where the league then punishes them for the poor choices. Just like, how does that make sense?
Right.
How does that make sense? It's a process. So if the NFL is going to help, take care of the players' souls, the first thing you have to do is let the players know they actually have a soul that needs to be taken care of. So even like the term psychology, right? Psyche means soul, right? The logic of the soul. But even still, even in psychology, we gloss over it. There's always the pioneer that no one's ever heard about, because they went first. And no one ever heard about them because they were obliterated by the powers that be, right? But they created a crack, And another pioneer comes and makes that crack a little bigger. And then another one comes and makes it a little bigger. And so I think if there were an athlete like that today, hopefully they'd be taking the crack that I made and they'd be making it bigger. These conversations, I think, are an example of what's going to change things.